Hello, welcome to our virtual event. My name is Megan, and I am so happy to have you here with us. And I'm joined by Sansome and Dewey, who are two injured rescues from the San Francisco wild flock. And we know that's why you're here today. You love San Francisco's wild parrots. We love San Francisco's wild parrots, and I absolutely love San Francisco's wild parrots. And we want to tell you more about what Mickaboo is doing to support these birds. So thank you for joining us for our parrot pregame. And before we get started, Sansom and Dewey and I wanted to share a little bit about what Mickaboo is with you. So we've got some slides up now. So Mickaboo is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we were founded in 1996. And we are dedicated to the care and rescue of companion birds. We have no paid staff. We are entirely volunteer run, and we don't have a physical location. We rely on volunteer foster homes to take care of all of the birds in our foster flock. And our foster flock currently has over 450 birds in it. Around 50 of those are actually parrots from the San Francisco wild flock that you're going to learn more about today. And we cover the greater Bay Area all the way out to Sacramento. And we take in over 150 to 350 birds a year. And on this slide, you see photos of Mick. And Mick was one of the first cockatiels that our founder, Tammy, rescued, and is how we got our name Mickaboo. Mick and Aboo were two of the first birds that Mickaboo supported back in 1996. And I want to go over our agenda for today so you know what to expect. So we're going to first have an introduction to the wild parrots of San Francisco and learn a little bit more about them. And we will also talk about why we need to rescue the wild parrots. And we're going to talk about the wild parrots who are looking for their homes. We'll go over some success stories. We're going to talk about how you can help us. And we'll talk about a genetics project that we're working on and we're really excited about. And then we'll have a wrap up and some credits. And I think I actually need help turning my camera back on. If the host could help me with that, I'm unable to do that. And if you have questions throughout this event, please go ahead and send them to us in our Q&A box today on Zoom. We will do our best to answer those questions live. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, welcome. We're happy to have you here as well. And go ahead and send your questions in the comment box, and we will answer those live as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being here today.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get started. I know people want to know a little more info about the wild parrots. So could you tell me how the flock started and where is the flock?
Good question. Let's see if we can get some visuals up here for you. Here's a beautiful photo of a wild parrot from San Francisco munching on a blossom, as they like to do in the city. So yeah, where are they? Well, you might have heard about the wild parrots of Telegraph Hill. They became celebrities of some level after the successful movie that came out back in 2005. But the truth is that the birds are residents and frequenters of most of the city of San Francisco these days. You'll see them up in the Presidio, all the way down to Brisbane. They're foraging all over the city, and they know their way around San Francisco pretty well at this point. So Telegraph Hill is one of their stop-off points. Sometimes you'll see little subflocks hanging out there, but it's not where they roost or where they live per se. So they have a roost that's by the ferry building, and they forage all over the city. They're not the only wild parrot flock in the Bay Area, though. This highly scientific map is showing you the locations of 3 wild flocks that are existing in some numbers in the Bay Area. So there are smaller flocks down in Sunnyvale and also in Palo Alto. They're a lot smaller than San Francisco, though.
Thank you. And I love this map. And what species of bird is this? What kind of parrots are they?
Great question. So in San Francisco, we have this unique hybridization happening between the red-masked parakeet, which is also sometimes known as cherry-headed conure, but we like to call them red-masked parakeets because that's the wild terminology rather than the aviculture terminology. We prefer to see the birds flying around in wild flocks rather than living as pets. So that's the red-masked parakeet, and then also the mitered parakeet. And in the wild, they're native to slightly different countries. You'll find the red-masked parakeets in Ecuador and Peru, and the mitered parakeets in Argentina, Bolivia, also in Peru, but not the same part of Peru. And so they don't have this hybridization happening, whereas in San Francisco they do. And then the flocks in Palo Alto and Sunnyvale are mostly mitered parakeet traits. We don't see so much of the red-masked parakeet down there.
Got it. So we have our own kind of special San Francisco parrot. I love that. And I know a lot of people are probably wondering, how did this wild flock start? Do we have any ideas of how we got to have wild parrots in the first place?
Well, there are many urban legends. They flew in off of ships from exotic lands, or there were accidents at San Francisco airport or what have you. But I think they're probably just escaped inventory out of a pet store. That's the popular theory in both San Francisco and down in the South Bay. And it does seem very likely these birds were imported as wild-caught birds for the pet trade, sadly. That was stopped in the 90s, but that's also when the birds were first noticed in the city. And the flock has grown from the original handful of four all the way up to about 220 birds now in San Francisco.
Wow, 220. I think we have a photo we're going to share of that. And how do we know how many birds are in this photo?
That's a great question. Well, this picture was taken in the winter months when the poplar trees they like to roost in a lot of the time are pretty bare. So that is a nice time to go up and try and catch them at dawn before the flock starts to mobilize. So they head out foraging once it gets light. But at first light, if you're there up quite early, you can get pretty much almost every parrot before the breeding season begins. They all roost together. So we just take a photograph when we get an opportunity like this, and then take a quick look at groups of 10 approximately, and that gives us about 220 birds, believe it or not. It doesn't look like a lot in that picture, just in a couple of trees, but that's pretty much the whole flock of San Francisco. And that's just from a couple of years ago, and we think the numbers are holding pretty steady right now. Audubon obviously do a count as well, the Christmas count, and they've been finding similar numbers as well. So we're pretty confident about this.
Okay, about 220 birds. And I know this year is a presidential election year, but last year there was a special election to come up with the official animal of San Francisco. And I'm so delighted to share that wild parrots won. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, it feels like we're bragging a little bit, but it became quite intense competition against the sea lions. So the San Francisco Chronicle started a fun pick the official animal of San Francisco contest in March last year. And there were lots of candidates. And the bison were in there, all kinds of animals. And in the end, it came down to sea lions versus wild parrots in 4 rounds of voting. And what started out as a kind of a fun discussion point turned into this intense battle because it was very close. The sea lions looked like they had the upper fin, and we really, our volunteers got very invested in this. Becoming the city got behind it and said they would make this the official animal of San Francisco. So, it really was important to us to make sure that the parrots became an official residence and able to win the support of that. So yeah, it turns out that the majority of people in the city agree. So they won. They became voted the official animal of San Francisco, and now you'll find them on the library cards and the voting stickers. And I think it's a nice way to cement their status after all this time of living in the city.
Yes, we were so delighted. And on the screen here, you're seeing a little mock-up. The San Francisco flag usually has a phoenix on it, but they replaced it with the wild parrots in celebration of their win. And I know a lot of folks might know these parrots from the famous documentary that came out in the 2000s, The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill. I hear that you helped work on this project to remaster the movie, Sarah. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, just quickly, this was a bit of a personal passion project for me personally, not so much with my Mickaboo hat on, but just with a lot of admiration for the film. Obviously, it was very successful, and it won awards on its release in 2005. But it was filmed in 16 millimeter film, and now that we're in 2024 and all the streaming services require higher standards, higher resolution media. Judy Irving, the director, was undergoing a remastering project, but it was a massive undertaking. The film has over 119,000 frames, and they all needed to be individually restored from a scan of the negative. And There's only so much automation you can apply to that process. So it was a painstaking effort to remaster the film in 4K, and it took about 3 years. So I worked on most of reels 2 and 4. Judy worked on most of reels 1, 3, and 5, and then there was a final process to work on some particularly troublesome spots where there were a lot of artifacts to clean up. And finally, we're done, and it's been really popular. It's been sold out. A lot of dates at the Roxy. It's been shown up at San Rafael at the Smith Film Center, and it looks amazing. So yeah, there's a personal link there between obviously the work we do to care for the wild parrots now, and working on this film with Judy. And it's been a really fun project, and you can still see it. The Roxy have been adding more dates. They had some holdovers, and there's still a couple of dates where it's going to be screened. So if you're in San Francisco and you would like to see it on a cinema screen, it's not too late. It'll be going out to other theaters soon, and then going to streaming after the theater release is finished.
We are so excited that this movie is come back, and since the parrots are so in people's minds now after the San Francisco Chronicle contest, we at Mickaboo had an art contest, and we took the art that won from that contest and put it on some merch that will benefit Mickaboo. And there is a link in the chat if you would like to go ahead and order your own wild parrot merch. And you could also adopt some wild parrots, and you might get some flung apple in your eye like I just did.
It's good for the skin. It's good for the skin, Megan.
Yes, yes. That's why my skin's so moisturized. So thank you so much, Sarah, for giving us this intro. And a reminder, if you have questions at all about these wild birds, please go ahead and send them to us in the Q&A. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Dara to join us. And we're going to talk a little bit about why Mickaboo helps these birds. Welcome, Dara.
Hi, Megan. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know usually these birds do really well on their own in the city, but when they get sick or injured, Mickaboo is here for them. And I'm seeing a loading screen, Dara. I'm not seeing the slideshow right now.
Okay, sorry, let me try again.
It's okay. So yeah,
Yeah,
the birds
and
usually do well, but we take care of them when they get sick and injured. And we're going to talk about what those reasons are, why they're coming into Mickaboo.
right, sorry, apologize. I'm
That's
not
okay.
sure
We
what's going on
rehearsed it
here.
earlier and it worked, but now that we're live, that's how
Yes.
life works, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, and I think that it's important to sort of point out that, the flock is actually doing quite well. And so we're going to really kind of talk about some of the exceptions. So now can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we see your screen.
Great. Thank you. And so first and foremost, I think the big elephant in the room here is bromethalin. And so that I would say is sort of a factor with about half of the wild conures that we bring into Mickaboo.
And what is bromethalin? And can you tell us more about how it's impacting the flock?
Yeah, so bromethalin is a rat poison. And essentially, the parrots are getting into it and ingesting it. And it's leading to what we see as neurological issues. And this is the expected effect on rodents as well. And so oftentimes, these are some pictures of Acorn, who was an intake. And in the photo on the far left, you can kind of see there's a little bit of a head tilt, some imbalances, potentially other symptoms that are or maybe a little bit more subtle, but we're really seeing a lot of them come in with some neurological damage.
And what happens to these birds when they come to Mickaboo, and how are we supporting them?
Yeah, so about half of them that show signs of bromethalin are likely to survive. And unfortunately, Acorn survived about a month, and with really sort of a lot of specialized care for some of these birds. Acorn unfortunately passed away, but there are many who go on to survive. But it after about 3 months, there's sort of this time period where there's a lot of support required. There's no cure, but some of them will go on to live a higher quality of life and regain some of that balance and neurological function. Sometimes there's gastrointestinal issues that can be treated. So some of the symptoms can be treated. Sometimes they exhibit seizures, so they can be given seizure medication. but yeah, it's something that, is really a work in progress.
And I know that we spend a significant amount on supporting these birds when they come in. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, so hospitalization, even, past the acute phase is about 1,200 a month for each bird. And on average, during that time where they need a lot of specialized care, on average, again, there's a lot of sort of variability in both symptoms and the medical care that they need. On average, about 3,500 to provide that specialized care to give them a chance for survival. And I also wanted to point out that, while we could see the symptoms, it wasn't until recently. So Mickaboo embarked on helped out for 4-year study that was recently published in 2019 that actually confirmed that it was in fact bromethalin that was leading to these symptoms and illness in the birds.
Right, and that study is in +1, and if you want to read that online, if you're the sciencey type, you can absolutely do that. And I know when that study was published, we went and talked to the city about their use of bromethalin, and they shared they're only using it in the sewers. So where do we think these birds are accessing bromethalin, and what does it look like? How can we stop this?
Yeah, so bromethalin looks a little bit like something a parrot might want to eat. Um, and so, the main theory is that it is, they are getting access to it through the private use of bromethalin. So if it's sort of left out or spread on top of a building or in areas where they can access, that's what we believe that they are accessing the poison. And it's, meant to be a little bit yummy, and it's visually appealing because they're trying to attract rodents, and of course, a lot of wildlife is getting into it. And so I think that really, and you can go and you can buy bromethalin. You can order it online. You can probably have it delivered to your door, and that it's, spread the word. So tell people that they really shouldn't be using this. We also know that it can affect other pets and wildlife as well. And there was another more recent study too that officially detected bromethalin in birds of prey. And so there are a lot of other solutions out there, including raptors are the solution, which is a much more sort of a better way to try to control the rodent population.
Right. And so if you take away one thing from today, please let it be to stop using bromethalin. Let everyone that you know the impact of bromethalin on wildlife, and let's keep our wild birds wild. I know you said about 50% of the birds coming into Mickaboo show signs of bromethalin poison. What other reasons are they coming in to us sick and injured?
Right. Well, it's a little bit of a dangerous world out there sometimes for everyone. And a lot of times there can be a lot of physical trauma or injury. So bacterial infections, or smashing into a car or a side of a building, or maybe, other kind of accidents, getting tangled in something. And so on the left is a picture of Zelly, who came in with a fractured leg. And on the right is Julian, who you'll actually hear about a little bit later, who came in with a fractured pelvis. Then there are other things out there that can attack you. So here's a picture of Mooshi, who you'll also hear about later. And if you take a look at Mooshi's beak, Mooshi was attacked by a hawk. And so you can see sort of the damage to the beak there.
Got it. And since how long has Mickaboo been helping the wild flock, and how many birds have we helped in that time period?
Right. So more than 20 years at this point. And over that time period, there have been 236 intakes. Now, unfortunately, 82 of them were not able to recover, but 64 of them have since been adopted. 26 of them are currently in foster care, and you're going to hear about some of those in a little bit later. 21 of them are still in the hospital, and 37 of them have been released. And I also wanted to point out that actually in 2023, that was kind of a record year. And so there were 20 intakes that year. So it really was either they're getting into more trouble, or perhaps the flock is growing. But we're hoping that is just an anomaly, and that things are going to settle down.
Right. And I know a lot of those intakes, at least 8 of them, were fledgling babies. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so here's the cute pictures of little um, uh, red mask parakeet babies. And the first thing to notice is that they don't have that little red mask. And so when they hatch, they are green. Well, they when they feathers first grow in, they are green. And their parents are taking great care of them out there in the wild. And so it's really kind of an exciting time to during fledgling season. But it's also kind of a stressful time as we all hold our breath and hope that these little youngsters don't get into too much trouble. And this year, 8 of them actually got into a little bit more trouble than they could handle, and so it was a record year for us. I think there was a time where we got a call almost every day from San Francisco Animal Care and Control to say, "Okay, we've got another fledgling here that is in need of immediate medical care." Um, and so that is really a big factor. If you see the one on the far right in the bottom there is missing a little bit of a tail, and then this is actually Tingley on the left. This is a little youngster who came in 2022. You can see that he's in little foot casts, so he was actually being pulled out of his nest by a crow and had some spraining that occurred. But happy to report that once the cast was off, there's Tingley on the little left, perching, moving around a lot better, and also, meeting a new friend to try to show them the ropes.
Right. And Tingley is looking for his forever home. So if you want to adopt Tingley or any of these birds we talk about, we'd love to have you do that. And I think it's important to mention, like you said, Dara, we get called by San Francisco Animal Care and Control when these birds show up at the shelter. Since they are not mammals, they do require that special avian medicine, and Mickaboo is known for doing that. So they reach out to us and we send a little birdie ambulance to go get these birds and get them immediate care. And I want to finish up, Dara, how can folks help? What can we do to support Mickaboo and these birds?
Yeah, so first and foremost, let's try to let them be wild. And so yes, go there, observe them, but try not to interfere with what they're doing. They're doing just fine without sort of humans chasing after them or interfering. So avoid feeding or taming them, and don't encourage them to come indoors. They're doing just well outside. But when they do get into trouble, it is a large financial burden. So, you can certainly, uh, all of our donations that come in are very useful for caring for a lot of the wild flocks. Then after that, we're always looking for foster homes. These are specialized foster homes depending on the needs of a conure. So some of them can be quite wobbly. Um, Spread the word, put up posters, remind people not to use bromethalin, and then reach out to us and volunteer. We could certainly use a lot more volunteers as well.
Absolutely. Everyone you're meeting today is a volunteer with Mickaboo, and we'd love to have you come do this with us. Thank you so much, Dara, for telling us about how they get to Mickaboo. And now I'm going to invite Sarah back, and we're going to talk about some of these birds who are looking for their forever homes. Welcome back, Sarah.
Hello, hello, I'm back.
So I know we're going to look at Beale and Clay first, who you're fostering. Can you tell us how Beale and Clay came to Mickaboo?
Yes, I would show them live, but it's a little complicated to help with hosting the event as well as control multiple groups of parrots. So we're going to watch some video. But Beale and Clay came to Mickaboo quite some years ago. Beale's first SOS was 2011. So we took in Beale over 10 years ago. And we think he's a bromethalin case. It's very hard to confirm. I mean, obviously there are a number of symptoms that we use to determine what we think it likely caused, but Beale also has a lot of plucking. So in this, you can see, well, actually, maybe you can't see because they're both kind of busy eating, but on the left there is Beale. He is very plucked on his belly. So he's quite an unusual bird for us in the sense that most of the wild parrots that we rescue, whilst they may have injuries or they deal with bromethalin, it's quite unusual for them to pluck or have hormonal problems. But Beale is the exception to the rule there. So he's got a very plucked belly and legs. And we think that he is a likely bromethalin case, but the plucking is an additional complication with his situation. We do our best to pair them up. So we're going to be showing you a few pairs to help you meet some individuals and understand a little bit more about what's involved in caring for them and what it's like to live with them. So when Beale came in, obviously they come in usually on their own because something's happened to them and they're not well. And then we do our best in foster care to find a bird that they get along with. They have to choose. It's a whole process. The birds have opinions about who they want to spend their time with. And so pairing them up can be something that just through trial and error, we have to see who gets along with who. So Beale did have a buddy called Monty. Unfortunately, Monty passed away in 2018, and we had to find Beale a new buddy. So we started the dating game all over again, and Beale is now partnered up with Clay, who came in a few years later. But Clay is a classic bromethalin case. He's very ataxic. He tends to tumble when he moves quickly. So he will sort of roll and then right himself. But he loves his food. He has no problems eating, no problems with his digestive tract. So as long as he's got a nice towel, flannel, soft-lined base to make sure he doesn't hurt himself when he falls, and nice grippy rope perches, which make it easier for him to hold on to when he's climbing around, he does just fine. And so Beale and Clay they're very happy together. They're two peas in a pod. They're almost always together. And we do need to place them in a foster home. They are with me right now, but I tend to be the landing spot for new intakes. And so it's really important that we place them into foster homes that free up the space for the intake buffer zone that we need. You know, as Dara mentioned, last year was a really a high intake year of 20 birds. And so we've really filled up our spots. And if we can't get more foster homes trained up and recruited, we're going to really struggle with capacity. If we have another year like last year in 2024, and I really hope we don't, that could be really difficult for us to have capacity for otherwise.
Right. And I know we have a link in the chat right now of how you can start our adoption and foster process. And it starts by taking our basic bird care class online, which is free. And we do have an audience question. Is Beale still plucking, and will his feathers ever grow back?
Beale is still plucking in the sense that Beale is kind of an over-groomer. So as you'll see in the vlog, the parrots preen each other. They preen their mates all over, and they alloprene each other's flock mates on their heads and their necks. And Beale just goes too far. So he spends a lot of time cuddled up with Clay with them preening each other. And one side of Clay's head is actually a little bit plucked as a result because Beale will overgroom Clay as well. The follicles on Beale's belly are so damaged through continuous plucking that they will never grow back. But he's not in any pain. He doesn't need any medication. This is really just kind of left over from his original illness and problems. So although it looks pretty pathetic, he's a very reasonably mobile bird given his circumstances. He enjoys daily baths in his water bowl. So yeah, he's just always going to overgroom and pluck out feathers, and you know, they get such enrichment out of each other that we wouldn't want to separate Clay and Beale just because Beale is occasionally pulling out feathers. It's not ideal, obviously, but it's also decreased a lot, and they really need each other for the support and enrichment that they get.
Right. And before we move on to the next pair looking for a home, I know you mentioned Beale's been with Mickaboo for over 10 years. What's the lifespan of these birds?
Great question. It's a lot longer in captivity than it would be if they were living a wild life. So with good diet and good care, they can live up to 30, 35 years. I mean, in practice for us, we do see it's usually not that long for these birds. They can have residual health issues as a result of exposure to bromethalin, or sometimes the injuries or problems that originally affected them and resulted in them coming in will also shorten their lifespan. So it's unlikely to be 20 to 25 years, but We have had some homes that have had the birds for approaching 20 years now that are long-term volunteers with Mickaboo who've been involved in doing this for some time already.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing, Clay and Beale. And let's go ahead and meet April and Lyon, who I know you're also fostering, and we'd love to get them a more permanent home. So again, you can help those new intakes when they need it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So April and Lyon are also with me. This first, I got two videos here to show, and this first one is sort of an origin story showing April. So April came in 2012, and April was the victim of a hawk attack. So you can see in this video, there's white on the top of her head and some pink, and that's her scalp. She was scalped by a hawk, and she was able to get away, but she did get some spinal trauma, which affected her feet. So from her injuries, all of her toes were pointing forwards, which was affecting her ability to perch. So one of the first treatments that we tried as a form of physio, it's a bit like the surfboard that you saw Tingley was on, as Dara described in some of her photographs she was showing, where we stabilized his ankle by taping his feet onto a little stabilizing, it's basically popsicle stick and medical tape, but it's only for a few days. And obviously they get fed and cleaned very carefully in that period. So April, we did a similar physiotherapy and used these kind of snowshoes where to try and get her toes in the right position. We used, again, sort of sticks and tape. And again, this was not done at home. This was done by avian vets who were responsible for placing the feet into these little casts and doing all the rechecks and follow-up. So this is not something anyone should be doing at home. But this was done for about a couple of weeks in total. Unfortunately, it didn't hold, and there are no guarantees. But April has actually adapted really well, and she does perch on larger perches. So we've modified her setup to give her an environment that she can navigate quite comfortably, and she has a lot of flat perches too. So this was her fairly soon after she came in. You can see her tail is missing again as a result of the hawk attack. So she was still recovering in this first video. Maybe I should move on.
Yeah, let's see her now with her buddy Lyon. And I understand that they're both DNA tested to be females.
Yeah, they're both girls. So this is April. This is more how she looks today. She's got her tail back. And her toes, yeah, they all point forward, but that's just how she is. And she is actually a really good flyer. So, oh, and that's Mooshi and Julian. Well, we'll be talking about them in a second. But you get a little sense of Mooshi and Julian as a preview there as well. So April, she doesn't show any signs of bromethalin exposure. She has no problems with staying completely upright, and she has no balance issues. So she's just a simple predator attack. And so she flies really well as a result. A lot of the birds with exposure to bromethalin, they would fly in circles if they could fly at all, and they would never be able to navigate properly, whereas April is able to fly and navigate, but she wouldn't do very well. There's no way she'd survive back with the flock because of her feet. So she and Lyon are really happy buddies, and you can see here they're just going to town on a chew toy that they've got there to play with. They have a lot of shelf perches, which give April nice wide surfaces. So she's got plenty of padded areas as well to make sure she doesn't get any sores on her ankles, because she kind of walks around on her ankles a lot with all her toes pointing forwards. And they enjoy taking baths in their water bowl. Yeah, they're both very active birds. Lyon is a little bit more of a classic bromethalin case, a little like Clay, with some wobbliness, and does better with rope perches and flat perches. So again, we've got a lot of balcony shelves for them to hang out on. But they're really tight, and they preen each other a lot. And they cuddle up together on their highest flat perch at night when they go to bed. So they're very sweet.
They're super sweet, and they're on the quieter end for the wild parrots too. So if you're looking for a little quieter birds, these might be a good fit for you.
I don't know. April has her moments.
Right. They are wild parrots. You've probably heard them in the city, and
I
it's that
mean,
sound in our homes.
sunrise and sunset is still a big deal, but yeah, they're not, I wouldn't describe them as friendly in the sense that, you know, if you imagine having a bird that steps up on your hand or your arm, they do not like hands at all, but they do love walnuts, and they will take a treat from your fingers reluctantly if that's the only way that they're going to get it. So, you know, they know me and I can approach them. But, you know, equally, because I foster a lot of birds, I'm not spending as much time socializing them with some of the birds that we'll see later on.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing, April and Lyon. And I'm going to invite back Dara to talk about Mooshi and Julian. But while she's coming on, Sarah, how does Mickaboo name these birds? Where are we getting their names from?
Oh, great question. The vast majority of them are named after streets in San Francisco. So we have a long list of all the streets in the city, and every time a bird comes in, we take a look at the street names. And if there's one close by we haven't used, we'll sort of start there. But we do have a few, like Mooshi, who picked up names from the people who rescued them. So we get a lot of members of the public who help with getting the birds to the shelter, or even contact us directly sometimes. And if they have a name that they're very attached to that we haven't used before, then sometimes we go with that. So Mooshi, there's no Mooshi Street in San Francisco. That's just in honor of her rescuer.
Got it. And I know we picked up a bird on Christmas Eve that we named Noel. So we do make exceptions, but in general, they're for streets. Welcome back, Dara. I know you are fostering
Thank
these
you.
two now. Could you tell us how Mooshi and Julian came to Mickaboo?
Yeah, so I actually showed, you know, when we were talking about accidents and injuries, a picture of Julian that came in with a fractured pelvis, and Mooshi, who had been attacked by a hawk and had that large beak injury.
And how are they doing now? And what would a home need to know to have these birds to be prepared for these birds?
Yeah, well, I would say they're doing much better. They definitely also show some signs of bromethalin. So they are a little wobbly, but generally, you know, a slight, just some very slight sort of cage adaptations. So I put in a lot more rope perches and a little bit wider rope perches so that they can kind of grip a little bit more because they do wobble a little bit. But they're in, you know, a regular, well, as large of a size cage as we can, and you can see them out here. They like to come out a lot. I actually keep them in they actually want to fly. Mostly Julian really wants to fly. But again, it's a little bit dangerous for them because they kind of zag a little bit and start going in little circles. So when they are out, I'm very sort of careful and mindful, and I actually have them in a smaller room so that they can't really get the velocity going that could cause potentially another injury. But for the most part, you know, they get along really well. They're great eaters, not so fussy, although they left all of their carrots behind the other day, and to me they tasted just fine. So, but they'll take treats from your hand quite easily, unless they've recently had a nail trim, and then they kind of play a little bit like, no, thank you, I don't want to come near you again. And both of them will step up onto a rope perch. So if they do happen to sort of fly off in a zigzag, I can pick them up off the floor if they happen to end up there and bring them back to their cage.
Right. And I know that these are similar to a lot of our birds where they kind of just want to be their own birds and be their own selves, and we provide more sanctuary space for them to do that. Could you speak about what that experience has been like to you and your family? I know you've got kids helping carry for these birds too.
Yeah, and you know, I also you know, I had a pet red masked parakeet for 25 years, and it's been a really different process, I think, having the wild conures. You know, for example, if they're you know, I make sure the cage is all secure, and we kind of roll out on the balcony to get some natural sunlight. And you know, my pet conure, before he passed away from cancer, would go out and kind of scream around and think, wow, this is the greatest thing. And when Mooshi and Julian go out, the first thing they do is they stay silent, and they're kind of looking around like, okay, is there danger? Are there hawks? And they seem very sort of aware of their surroundings. And so they really have that sort of knowledge base. So they're living in the home, they like their toys, they like a lot of action and entertainment, but they also, you know, are a lot sort of aware of some of those dangers. So it's been kind of unique in sort of getting to know, okay, what is the difference of when they are, you know, wild birds versus a pet.
Right. Thank you for mentioning that. And I think it's really important that folks know how important it is to get these birds into homes and that you can do a lot for the bird. Maybe the bird won't be so much what you are expecting, but the bird needs us to be there for them in what the capacity they're looking for. And Sarah, I know we're going to talk about another birds. They're not San Francisco parrots. Are they Palo Alto or Sunnyvale parrots? Where are Emerson and Finley from?
Yeah, that's right. They are one of each. So Emerson and Finley here. Oh, and I apologize because I'm playing a slightly different version of the video. But Emerson and Finley are shown here as a small, very small example of the birds that we sometimes get from Palo Alto and Sunnyvale. They came to us about 3 or 4 years ago, and they're both pretty young. They came in as what looked to us to be, you know, fledglings the prior year, so less than a year old, having had flight-related accidents where they had likely flown into a car or building. We don't see nearly as many birds that need rescue from those flocks in the South Bay. I think, you know, it's a slightly more open space. The flocks are very much smaller. We think there's less than 35 birds in both flocks. And we haven't seen as many issues with bromethalin or rat poison exposure, thank heavens. But every now and then we do get some birds that have, you know, maybe a broken wing or some physical trauma. And that's what happened to these two. So we paired them up together because they're both mitered parakeets. They vocalize slightly differently, and they're a little bit different in their presentation. They're a little bit larger. And they really got along like a house on fire pretty much straight away. So they preen each other a lot. They fight over which food, you know, who's going to eat out of which food bowl. They have one each, but, you know, food is very important to parrots. So meal times are very exciting. Finley likes to call dibs on all the treats out of the food bowls. But they both have a droopy wing because of their original accidents. And Finley's beak sometimes gets a little out of shape and needs a bit of grooming, which shouldn't normally be done to a healthy beak, but Finley's beak was damaged in their accident.
Right. And so it's because they're a mitered parrot that we're not seeing that red mask on them. Finley's not actually a baby parrot.
That's right. Finley does have, if you get really close up, there are tiny little spots of red right around the top of the beak and around the eyes, but it's a much more mitered pattern, obviously. So it's never going to be a full red mask like you would see with their red mask parakeets. And it will probably develop over the next few years, and there'll be a few more red patches that pop up. Emerson's a bit more of a classic presentation of the mitered parakeet.
Thank you for sharing them. And if you're watching again, please go ahead and send us any questions you have in the Q&A or the comments on Zoom. And now let's go ahead and transition to some success stories. We hope that one of you will bring these birds home and make them a success story, but let's meet some who have already done that. Who are we looking at here, Sarah?
Yeah, this is Belvedere. And I think it's worth saying, you know, as we show these videos, this is the sort of moral dilemma, if you like, of the fact that, you know, we are a parrot rescue, but we do feel strongly that parrots belong in the wild. So we are not a big fan of pet stores that sell birds. We don't want to see more pet birds being bred in captivity. We don't like the term pet bird. There's just an awful lot of birds already in captivity that need better care and medical treatment and safe homes. And so for us, for the wild parrots, a lot of these wild parrots, when they get sick or injured, they wouldn't survive in the wild anymore. But they are extremely intelligent, they're very adaptable, and they can do really well in a prepared home. So that's why our process is pretty involved with a class and a phone interview and a home visit, because we really want to see them getting enrichment and appropriate safe housing and healthy diet. And these success stories are kind of showcasing what is possible when all those things are in place. And so this is Belvedere, who was actually adopted quite a few years ago. And her adopters were really into dog training. They'd done a lot of work with dogs, and they applied similar approaches, you know, positive reinforcement and clicker training. And Belvedere got a lot of enrichment activities. And so this is like a little sample of them showing all the things that they do with Belvedere. And this is not about taming a wild bird. I don't want to give the impression that we're sort of trying to show that we've, you know, this is not domestication. There's no way to domesticate these birds. That takes generations and generations and, a few thousand years of selectively breeding desirable traits that make animals compatible with our human life. That's not what we're doing here. This is about providing enrichment and mental stimulation so that the birds are happy and engaged. In the wild, they would spend hours every day foraging. This activity is replacing that for them. It's giving them activities to do which are stimulating. They enjoy the rewards that they get with the social interaction with people that they've built trust with, by getting treat rewards in the form of small bits of food that they enjoy. And so Belvedere is doing a whole pile of tricks here. She's doing hang, and she's doing reach down. She's doing fist bump, beak bump. She's doing wave and spin to the left, spin to the right. She knows all those as separate individual tricks, and she'll do a whole series of them before they give her watermelon as a reward.
Right. And not obviously not all of the parrots are going to want to or be able to do this, but some of them certainly can. Is there anything else we want to talk about Belvedere?
Yeah, I mean, I think Belvedere is kind of an advanced case example of someone who's really invested a lot of time in teaching a lot of tricks on a lot of different scenarios. But I would say even if your bird doesn't seem to particularly enjoy trick training, they will definitely enjoy foraging. And I think anyone providing a home for one of these birds has to be expecting to spend significant amounts of time setting up an enrichment activity or an enrichment environment for them, where they either have a foraging station or a foraging space, or activities that they're able to do with you, or some kind of trick training activities or sessions on a daily basis. So, no matter how receptive they are to trick training or clicker training, they are going to need your time and attention to give them an enrichment activity. Yeah.
It's so cool seeing Belle like this. And let's go meet another success story, Joey. I know you had fostered him too.
Yeah, Joey was a really fun foster to have. Joey is the exception to the rule. We talk about pairing up the parrots, but obviously here we've got a couple of examples of single birds who have really thrived without the company of another parrot. We do our best to find every wild parrot a friend in foster care and in Mickaboo's foster flocks. However, sometimes it just doesn't work out. We can't find anyone they seem to get along with, and some of them just seem really curious about people. And, depending on their personal history and experience and how long they've been with us, sometimes they're doing so well with human company and enrichment that they just end up as a single bird. And so Joey is one of those. He's always been pretty friendly with people, even when he was a wild parrot. He was actually rescued by a lady who lived on the Filbert Steps, and she saw him slowing down, looking wobbly, not keeping up with the flock every day. And she was the one who contacted us for help when she thought that he might be sick. She was really worried about that. So we worked with her and got him to the hospital. And yes, he is a bromethalin case. He's very wobbly. He doesn't need any medication, but he does need this modified setup with a lot of rope perches and, an environment where he's got either flat areas or grippy areas, and he wouldn't fall too far if something happened and he slipped. So he does really well in that setup. He's a really great eater with his fresh food because obviously that's what he's always known. And as you can see here, he loves head scratches, which is pretty unusual for the wild parrots. It's not unusual for them to get very comfortable on your shoulder or your arm, but it's quite unusual for them to be comfortable with you touching their head like this. And so Joey has really become super happy and comfortable with people. And he would spend a long time accepting head scratches and getting help with preening his pin feathers. So he got adopted last year, and he's doing great in his adopter's home. They do have other parrots. They're not from the San Francisco flock, but they still vocalize and enjoy celebrating sunrise and sunset together as a group, which gives him the avian ambient company that he enjoys as well.
Right. And then we're going to move on to our last success story, which you're looking at them right here, Sansome and Dewey with myself.
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to ask you some questions, Megan. We're going to turn the tables here. And I do have a slide to put up as well. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how long you've had them and how you ended up adopting them?
Yeah, so Sansome and Dewey, they both came into Mickaboo for different reasons. I have Dewey on a perch right now. I'm gonna try and put her front and center so you can see how beautiful she is. Dewey, her nest when she was a baby, she hadn't even fledged yet. It was attacked by a hawk. So Mickaboo's had her since before she fledged, and one of our volunteers actually taught her how to fly, and she's a little bit of a trepidatious flyer still to this day, I think because a human taught her how to fly and not a bird. And then Sansome, I'm going to bring him up and let's see if you can see him close up. This is Sansome. And he was found walking on Sansome Street in the financial district with his head backwards and bleeding. And he shows classic signs of bromethalin. And he has made a lot of progress since he's been with Mickaboo. He couldn't perch or fly when he first came into us. And now he's an expert flyer. They would be flying around and landing on me, but I bribed them to stay here with some apples and some nuts. So that's why they're staying so nicely next to me. I adopted them from Mickaboo in 2019, and you had been their foster. And when they were in your care, I know you have so many birds, but they were not at all the friendliness that they are now. And so how we got here is I did clicker training. I have a clicker here to show you. It's the same kind you use for dogs. And we started with what's called target training. And it's where you'll take a chopstick or a pencil or something, hold it up to the bird. I'll demonstrate here with Sansome, and they will beak it, bite it. And when they do that, you click the clicker and give them a treat. And that is they're associating that, oh, I did the requested behavior, I get a treat, and then they keep doing it and it's fun for them. And now we're at the point where they are recall trained, which means I can be across a room from them and I will tap my shoulder and say, come here, and they will fly across the room to me when I do that. And I've had them for 4 years now, and I am just getting to the point where they will let me touch their beak. So it takes time, it takes patience, but it's been so rewarding. And you see here in this photo, Dewey is the one on my shoulder, Sansome's on my head. That's their preferred places. And they both preen me. They will preen my hair strand at a time. Dewey pulls it out, which can be a little painful. Sansome doesn't, but I love them so much.
And would you say that they have slightly different personalities?
They have very different personalities. I think our running theory is because Dewey saw her whole family die in that hawk attack, that she is very protective. And even though she's younger than Sansome, she came in as a baby, he came in as an adult. She is very protective of him. And she is just a very loud bird. She is he'll sometimes be trying to get away and she'll bite onto Sansome's tail so he can't fly away. And Sansome is a very friendly guy. I think if he was not with Dewey, which we don't want that, they are very happy together. But I think if he wasn't with Dewey, he would be a little bit more like Joey, and be a little more interested in humans. When I'm working from home, Dewey will often stay in the background on top of their cage, and he will come sit on my head for up to an hour, just hanging out with me.
That's awesome. So what would you say would be the trick to anyone thinking of potentially fostering these birds and socializing them? What's the secret to making progress?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being consistent. You don't need to do the training a lot every day, but you need to do a little bit every day and be consistent with that. Even as much as 5 minutes a day of practicing that target training, it makes a difference. And the biggest thing is for you as the human to remember where you're at and what they're learning, and they learn so quickly once you get started.
Very cool. Very cool. Anything
Yeah.
else you want to share about Sansome Dewey?
I love them dearly, and I would love to see you guys have them in birds like Sansome Dewey in your home too. So please start our process, and take some of these birds home and give them this socializing experience that I've been able to. And I think it's important to mention Mickaboo is a great network of volunteers who love and are knowledgeable about parrots and behavior training and caring for them. So if you want to do this, we are here to support you in that endeavor.
Absolutely. You're not alone. And especially with some of these more wobbly birds that are more prone to needing more frequent checkups and health issues. Mickaboo funds the medical care for all foster birds, so you would not be liable for those expenses. We do spend upwards over $13,000 every month on our hospitalized wild parrots and checkups and care for all of our foster birds. So it's something that we're here for. But we do need people to volunteer and be foster homes, and we'll support all of your efforts to help us with that. So that's a great point. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and get into that. How folks can support this work, what they can do.
Oh yeah, that's right. We have more material. I just want to talk about Sansome Dewey all day. With some great pictures here showing some of the activity doing clicker training with Sansome Dewey and how much they enjoy doing target practice. Yeah, and if this looks interesting to you, yeah, we have a lot of resources, more material on our website about the work we do with the wild parrots. We've got some presentations that we've done in the past, and other resources about avian welfare and education, and SoCal parrot, because there are wild flocks of parrots down in Southern California of even more species, and SoCal parrot do great work as well. So if all these topics have been interesting to you, we have a lot of resources here you can check out. We also have our free bird care class. So if you're thinking of volunteering with us, that's a great place to start. Or if you have birds already and you're just looking for general husbandry info, that's a 3-hour class. It does cover a lot, even though we call it basic. It's quite comprehensive. So you can check all of that out. And we're always looking for foster homes. So if we haven't mentioned it already, we'll mention it one more time. We really do need to create some buffer space for the future intakes that we'll no doubt have coming this year. And our foster homes are pretty full, so we're recruiting. And if you think you could make space in your home and your day for caring for a pair of these birds, we'd love to talk to you. It is a little specialized, but if you think it could be for you, we'd love to speak with you and help you figure out if this is something you'd like to do. Cool.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm going to go ahead and invite Dara back and then also welcome Jaqueline, who's a research specialist. And the two of them have been working on a genetics project about the wild parrots. And we're going to let them share all about that with you. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, so hi, Jaqueline. Thanks for joining us today from University of California, San Francisco. So can you tell us a little bit about the research that we're doing on the genetics of San Francisco's wild flock?
Hi, Dara. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here to tell you about a new project with the San Francisco wild parrots that we just started in collaboration with researchers at Stanford University. So this new project of the wild parrots we're hoping to do some genetic investigation to learn more about the diversity of this flock and where it came from. We know that there are a lot of stories going around about how the flock got started in the first place, and genetics is a form of information we could use to actually figure out for sure maybe what happened there. But it's also useful for learning things about the level of relatedness in the flock, and ultimately, sometime down the line, this could lead to being able to use genetics to learn about the flock's health, which would be important for monitoring how they're doing.
Wow, that's so interesting. So tell me, how do you actually do this?
Well, we can start with any kind of biological sample. So that could be something like a feather or just even a drop of blood. So for example, you heard about Acorn earlier, who sadly passed, but Acorn kind of lives on because we were able to get a sample from Acorn to do this genetic sequencing in our laboratory. So we take that sample, we bring it into the lab where we have all the equipment and chemicals needed to extract and purify the DNA from that sample of blood or feather or whatever it is. And then we can do a further protocol to prepare that DNA for sequencing. So we load it into the sequencer, and that machine then converts the DNA into basically electronic sequence data that we can then analyze using a suite of methods just on the computer. So there's a huge amount that we can learn from just a very small sample of blood or something like that. So that's how it works, and how we're aiming to study all the topics that I showed on that previous slide.
And I see some words there that you're looking at. So is that a series of A, T, G's, and C's and all sort of linked together to make up the genome?
Yeah, so in that photo, that is what I look like every day, basically at the computer, and I am actually looking at the genome sequence of, in that picture, it's a California condor, but could be a parrot,
Right. All right. And so one of the things that sounds interesting is to figure out, who's related and might be interesting to figure out, okay, well, do they get along with their siblings? Or are they more likely to sort of pair up with unrelated individuals in captivity or who's distant cousins of whose, and also maybe how all of the different flocks are related. And so how many individuals are you thinking to look at?
So we are starting with just one individual, and that's Acorn, because we need a really high quality, complete genome sequence from one individual to use as the foundation for all of the further genetics work of other individuals. So after we have finished Acorn's genome, we're hoping to get the project going with a study of a few more birds where we can start to learn about the origins and the history of the flock, but also start to get some insights into how individuals are related to each other. Is there inbreeding within the flock? Because, it's a fairly small, isolated population. And ultimately, we would then want to expand into an even greater number of individuals, dozens at least. And with that level of sampling, we could really learn a lot of detail about the relatedness of individuals and the dynamics of the flock, like whether they're moving from place to place, and also learn about that interspecies hybridization between the red mass and the mitered parakeet in our unique, San Francisco population.
Now, I see a few interesting emojis there. So when you talk about sampling the birds, does it harm them at all?
No, it does not harm them. So we can use even just a feather or a very small drop of blood or feces. So just biological material, we can extract DNA from it. It does not have to harm the birds at all. And if we have a bird that, is deceased because they succumb to bromethalin or some other kind of health issue, then that's another way that we can get samples. And so it's unfortunate for the bird, obviously, but then they can kind of live on in immortality if we can get a sequence from them. So
Great.
no harming the birds.
All right. And so you talked about getting the one quality genome from Acorn. And I was actually at my office at UCSF in San Francisco, and we got the call, and we are actually right near San Francisco Animal Care and Control. So, also as a Mickaboo volunteer, I sort of have different ways of thinking about these things, but glad that we could be right there to kind of among the network of volunteers to help transport and try to save these beautiful birds. So what stage are you at right now with Acorn's genome?
So we are in the very early stages of this project, just getting started with our first high quality genome sequence for the red mass parakeet, which has never been generated before. So this is the work that we're doing in collaboration with researchers at Stanford, where we're using a new sequencing technology to generate the assembly. So the genome, for those if you're not familiar, the genome is the complete DNA sequence that is present in every single cell of our body, that is essentially the blueprint for making up all of our cells and proteins and such. So when we're sequencing, we are getting reads or small fragments of that DNA, and then we have to put it together because it comes out in small fragments. So it's like if a book went through a shredder and you're trying to reassemble the book, you're piecing sentences together, sentences into paragraphs, into chapters, and so forth. So we are in this stage where we have all the raw sequence data, and our next step is to put it all together into that fully assembled genome sequence for Acorn.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, you're piecing it all together. Okay. And so once you have this genome assembled, then you'll be better able to study other birds in the flock, because then
Yes.
you'll be able to sort out what goes where. Oh, so that's really
Exactly.
interesting. So then, what are the next steps for the future then?
Well, next steps are we're going to learn a lot more, even from just analyzing this one genome from acorn. We can learn about how much genetic diversity there is, even from just one individual. And so we're going to start there, and we're in the process of trying to collect more samples to get DNA from more individuals and do more sequencing and start to learn more about how the flock is doing, how individuals are related to each other, and so forth.
Okay, and how can we learn more once you have more results?
Well, we're working closely with Mickaboo, so we will be sort of disseminating any updates through them. Ultimately, as scientific researchers, our goal will be to publish these studies in scientific journals and make all those results and data available for the public.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Jaqueline, so much for joining us today. And we really look forward to hearing more about this in the future. Yeah, if there are any other sort of questions, there's also our emails there as well. So thank you again so much. And now back to you, Megan.
Thank you. That was so cool to learn about, and we are so excited that Mickaboo gets to be involved in this level of research to learn about these wild parrots. We hope that you've really enjoyed today's event. Thank you again for joining us for the Parrot pregame for the Super Bowl. Obviously, as San Francisco Wild Parrots, we're rooting for the Niners, and we hope that you are too. But I want to give you a few final reminders of how you can help. So you've heard throughout this presentation, we have a huge need for more foster homes. So if you think that you could provide a safe home for some of these wobbly birds, please, please, please go ahead and start our adoption process by taking our online class. And we would love to pair these birds up with you in your home. As we mentioned, the cost for caring for these birds is extraordinary. We spend on average $12,000 to $15,000 a month on veterinary bills for the wild parrots. So please donate. And then finally, please, please let everybody know to stop using bromethalin. Stop using rat poison. Rat poison harms wildlife. Let's keep our wild birds wild. Thank you again for joining us. We are so happy that you're here, and we hope that you learned something new about these wild birds. And we've got some credits that we're going to play now. And again, thanks for joining us. And if you have any remaining questions, please feel free to send them to us in the Q&A.